Joe Manchin lays down his red lines with respect to Biden's economic agenda. Striketober continues, though a halt of TV and movie production has been averted for now. And Love, Hate, 8, Monday edition. Monday Need to Know. Let's go. Good morning. This is Cheddar's Need to Know podcast for Monday, October 18th. I'm Jill with Carlo Versano. Carlo, I was about to say Love, Hate, 8 to end the week because that's what rolls off the tongue. But no, it is Monday and we're doing it today.
We are because, folks, if you were looking for us on Friday and you couldn't find us, once again, no, it was not you. It was us. We had some technical issues. Basically, we did a podcast on Friday. It exists out there. If you can find it in the, in the ether of the internet, by all means, let us know because it was actually a good one. But it didn't get recorded. Some issues on our side. So anyway, we'll do it today. We'll do a little Monday Love, Hate, 8, and it's going to be a good one.
If a tree falls in the woods, yeah. So I agree with you that it was a very good podcast, but we'll try and work some of our little anecdotes and stuff into this. Okay, so let's start today. I hope everyone had a good weekend. Let's start with politics. Senator Joe Manchin laying down his demands for what needs to be cut from President Biden's legislative agenda in order to gain his support, which, of course, Democrats need to pass the big social spending bill. The Democrat from West Virginia reportedly told the White House over the weekend that the child tax credit must include a work requirement as well as a $60,000 income cap. Manchin also said to be firmly against the cornerstone of Biden's climate plan, a $150 billion program that would push utility companies toward renewable energy. So those are two of the biggest things that Biden is trying to get passed as part of that bill, which now looks DOA. I mean, I don't know. It just looks like it's going to be gutted pretty much.
Yeah, you never know until, the fat lady sings, but it certainly looks like these are the biggest planks that are going to get cut here. Joe Manchin, we've talked about this in the past, right? He makes millions of dollars via investments in coal, including a company that he founded that his son now runs, a coal company that his son runs. So, I mean, it's hard to see that as anything other than like a corrupt conflict of interest. Seriously, I don't know what else to say about it. Now, his argument is that this is just too much money to give these companies basically subsidies. And these companies are basically, he's saying they're making this transition to clean energy anyway. So why does the federal government need to get involved? But the thing with climate change is that, anything that we spend on it now, it's a drop in the bucket compared to what it's going to cost us later on, right? $150 billion isn't even all that much money when it comes down to it. As for the child tax credit, which is the other big one, I'm not even really sure how that's good politics on Manchin's part, given that West Virginia, his state, is the poorest in America, I believe. And it's just, the income cap. So basically what this means is you could have two working parents who each make $30,000 a year, and they wouldn't be able to qualify for the $300 a month child tax credit, which is currently in place, but the Democrats need to, extend.
Well, it's the donut hole theory, which I covered a lot. I learned a lot about when I was a reporter covering the lead up to Obamacare, which is that, especially in this country, so if you're really rich or if you're wealthy, you're okay, right? Even let's talk about childcare. You probably can figure out a way to get your kid childcare.
Sure.
In this case here, if you're really poor and you're not doing well, you'll be eligible for this child tax credit. But it's the people in the middle who kind of get left out of everything, whether it be free health care or a lot of these social services.
The child. I know I've said this in the past, but as a new parent, having a kid is really expensive. Yeah. I know that this is not news to anybody else who has children out there, but Becky and I are trying to figure out childcare for when she goes back to work, and we're trying to run the numbers here, and we do okay. We're both working, and we do fine, and we're still having trouble figuring out. So it's just it's hard, right?
It goes back to also. The $60,000 should not be universal. Depending on where you live in this country, $60,000 goes either pretty far or not far at all. And when I was just even talking, and I even said, the poorest in this country, $60,000 in certain areas, you're not poor at all. You're actually doing quite well. When I was a reporter in Michigan, I think I was making and granted, this was like 20 years ago, but I made about $20-something thousand a year, which seemed crazy if you were. I came from living in New York, and then I went. Yeah. I was living well, Carlo. In Lansing, where I was living, I rented an apartment just for like a few $100 a month. My car didn't cost me much, and granted, I was single and whatever, but. The dollar just stretched a lot further, of course, than it does in other places. So it's just it shouldn't be a universal number.
Yeah, I would argue that it should be universal. It should just be a universal policy, but clearly that's not going to happen now.
All right, let's talk a little COVID. Dr. Fauci says the Johnson & Johnson vaccine should have been a 2-dose vaccine from the beginning. His comments followed a recommendation from the FDA's advisory panel that Johnson & Johnson recipients get a booster regardless of their age or underlying conditions. The FDA is expected to accept that recommendation in the coming days. In his Sunday TV rounds, Fauci also urging police officers to get vaccinated as police unions across the country have been resisting vaccine mandates despite COVID being the top cause of death for cops for the last 2 years.
5 times as many police officers in America died of the coronavirus in the last 2 years than from gunfire. And they are among the most anti-vax cohort. It's something that I really don't understand. And it's especially upsetting because police, that's one of those jobs. Not only are you just out there interacting with the public more than most other occupations, but it's one of the rare positions where you can forcibly, take somebody into custody, right? Like, it's just. They just have such a responsibility to get vaccinated, and I think it's honestly shameful that for the police who are still not abiding by these vaccine mandates. Speaking of vaccine mandates, I just wanted to mention this out Friday. Actually, Italy just started probably the biggest mandate that we've seen yet in a democracy. The entire workforce of that country, public or private, has to have this government-issued health pass. They're calling it a green pass. And if they don't, not only can they not work or not get paid, they get fined every day. So basically, the Italian government is saying, if you don't want the vaccine, fine, but you more or less can't leave your house because we're moving on now, and that's how it's going to be. And I give them a lot of credit. Now, some workers in Italy are threatening to strike over this, but I mean, it's Italy, right? They strike if it's cloudy out. So,
one thing that I did want to mention to keep an eye on is there's a possibly this new Delta variant. And I'm going to read. Yeah, I know. I sent this to you over the weekend, actually. I think I sent this to you. Or maybe I just put it in our general Slack for guest ideas and story ideas. So I'm going to read from Scott Gottlieb from his Twitter feed. He says, the UK reported its biggest one-day COVID case increase in 3 months, just as this new Delta variant with a very specific mutation, I'm paraphrasing, in the spike reaches 8% of UK sequenced cases. We need urgent research to figure out if this Delta Plus, as they're calling it, is more transmissible, has partial immune evasion. The variant's been in the UK since about July, but it has been slowly increasing in prevalence. There's no clear indication that it is considerably more transmissible, but we should work to more quickly characterize these and other new variants. We have the tools. This is not a cause for immediate concern, but a reminder that we need a robust system to identify, characterize new variants. It needs to be a coordinated global priority for COVID, the same as similar international efforts have become standard in influenza. So just in case you were finally feeling comfortable with life.
Yes.
Wah, wah.
Delta Plus, our new streaming service, apparently. Oh, God. Well,
yes, it's not a Delta Airlines service perk.
Yes,
it's actually a new, potentially, I guess. It sounds like it's not more dangerous than the other variant, but maybe, like he was saying, evades the immunity.
Yeah. All right, well, we'll keep an eye on that. Great.
Okay, one of the most notorious gangs in Haiti thought to be behind the kidnapping of 16 American missionaries in the suburbs of Port-au-Prince. While mass kidnappings have become common in Haiti, it is rare for gangs to target American citizens. The missionaries, 5 of whom are children, were on the way home from building an orphanage when they were abducted in the street, and their condition is unknown.
this happened over the weekend. This gang they call themselves 400 Maozo. That's the name of the gang. They've really upped the ante recently with mass kidnappings. They're snatching people off the street, cops, nuns, even priests mid-sermon. It's really something. And what's happening in Haiti between the earthquake, the assassination of the president there, COVID, it's just heartbreaking. This is a country that it was hanging by a thread even in better times, and they're essentially in full societal and economic collapse, and the gangs are more or less running the show there. So I don't know, we haven't had an update from the embassy on the condition of these missionaries, assuming they're alive, which hopefully they are, and they probably are, because I assume that they're going to want a ransom out of this. But this is another thing we got to keep an eye on this week, right?
Well, that's the whole thing, because there's a lot of questions right now about how the U.S. is going to get these people out. There are a ton of Americans in Haiti right now. They're trying to help, kind of like these people who were there to build an orphanage. And as we talk about kidnappings, hopefully it is not the start of a trend where these gangs are going to actually just target foreigners because potentially they have the money to pay the ransom.
Yeah, exactly. And those people are like you said, they're the ones that are coming in to help. And if there's a worry they're going to be abducted off the street, we're going to get less of that, right?
British politicians could soon get around-the-clock police protection after a member of parliament was killed on Friday in a brazen attack as he met with constituents. Sir David Ames was stabbed 17 times at an event in Essex outside of London. A British national and a son of a prominent former Somali political aide being held in connection with the attack under Britain's Terrorism Act.
Man, we got some bad news this weekend, huh? Okay, it wasn't all bad, but it feels that way, huh? This was the second time a British lawmaker was killed while meeting with constituents in the last 5 years. If you remember, Jo Cox, she was, I believe she was a member of the Labour Party. She was killed by a right-wing extremist at the height of all of the Brexit furor. Ames was a Tory. He was the opposite, basically. He was a Brexit hardliner, and he was killed by this alleged Islamic extremist, which they are now saying they do believe that this was Islamic terror. And remember, this is like when Gabby Giffords got shot at the grocery store, right? This is politicians meeting with constituents. That's one of like the bedrock parts of democracy, right? That's sort of what it's all about. And we need them to be able to do that, whether it's here or there, without the fear of being murdered by some psycho.
A strike of Hollywood production workers has been avoided after the union agreed to a tentative deal with the studios. Assuming the contract is ratified, the members of IATSE will get retroactive pay increases and more rest between shoots. That had been one of the sticking points. John Deere, Kellogg's workers, though, they are both still on the picket line, joining recent strikes by hospital workers in Buffalo, metal workers in West Virginia, coal miners in Alabama, and whiskey makers in Kentucky.
Not to mention those two recent strikes from Nabisco and Frito-Lay. This is something that you and I talked about in our Lost Pod on Friday, Jill. There is something happening. There's something happening with the labor movement in this country right now. It's really sort of remarkable. We're at the beginning of, I think, a real generational change in work. How we work, where we work, when we work, who we work for, what we decide to be worth our time, which, of course, time, remember, it's the only real asset. It's the only really non-fungible asset that we have, that there is. And you and I were talking about this the other day. If you're lucky enough to be someone like you or me, right, have a career, but not lucky enough to get rich off of it, but still have a good career, you're entitled to basically 1 or 2 weeks of time to yourself every year until you're 65 years old.
It's so depressing.
Right? When you think about it that way, it really is depressing. And I think what's happening, whether you're talking about Deere workers or production workers or even office workers who are really fighting some of these big companies' plans to get them back to the office, you're just having, I think, a real realization that your employer isn't your friend, right? Like, I mean, I've worked at places where they've literally said, like, we're a family here, right? We're a family. It's like, no, we're not a family, actually, right? My relationship with my employer is an exchange of labor for goods and services. Now, I may have friends at where I work, right? Jill, I would consider you a close friend, but I wouldn't consider my employer to be my friend. And I think that that's one of the things that COVID has sort of started people thinking about more, right?
Yeah, I mean, listen, I think the bottom line here is that just across the board, Americans who are overworked in general are realizing it's not worth it. That they're just, life's too short. They want to do
Right.
something that makes them happy. And for the first time in a very long time, workers actually have in many areas the upper hand because there is a huge labor shortage. So it used to be that if there was a strike, the employer could just find some freelancers to come in. That's not so easy right now. There's shortages amongst regular workers, let alone trying to fill in, find people to fill in. So it is a good, I think, situation for the labor movement for the first time in a long time. Again, we're seeing this, there's a lot of questions as to why the economy has not really picked up steam when it comes to job creation. The enhanced employment benefits, those have expired. And the thinking was maybe, it was people were making enough money where they didn't need to work and they were comfortable. We haven't really seen a bounce back in employment from that. I think one of the issues is that a lot of people are really rethinking about what they want to do with their lives. And as you say, it's all about how you spend your time. I would think that that's ultimately a good thing. Eventually
absolutely.
there has to kind of, as always, the pendulum swings and it'll, end up somewhere that hopefully we're all a little bit more comfortable in.
Yeah. I always thought a great tattoo would be to just get the number 4,000 tattooed on your body, because 4,000 is the number of weeks in the average lifespan, right? And I think it's just a really great reminder. It's not that much. We're not here that long. And the things that matter are, you can get joy and you should get joy from your work, or if you're lucky enough to, at least. But it's, that's not the thing that matters at the end of the day, right? It's your kids and your family and your friends and your community. The more we as Americans can realize that, which many other countries do, the better off I think we are, to your point.
This is a story that I did mention on Friday, but I think it's worth repeating. A friend of mine recently, one of her closest friends in the world passed away quite suddenly, and not COVID related, just it was like this fluke, really horrible thing that happened. And I was chatting with her and I'm like, how are you doing? It's just devastating. And she said, Jill, here's my takeaway. Life is short. And she's like, she works, she has a job that she loves. And she's like, I know you're like me. We love our jobs. She's like, nothing is worth missing anything with your family. She goes, don't miss one thing. Don't miss a first day of school. Don't miss a recital. Don't miss anything. It's not worth it. And I mean, look, as I sit here at work early in the morning, I never get to see my daughter in the morning, but it stuck with me, and she's right, by the way. Nobody looks back on their deathbed and says, I wish I spent more time at work.
It's one of those cliches that happens to also be very true.
Time for more to know before we go. Bill Clinton released from the hospital. He was being treated for an infection. The 42nd president walked out of UC Irvine Medical Center after 5 days. He had a urological infection that had developed into sepsis, according to doctors.
Bob Durst reportedly, talk about just having a bad week here. That's probably a crass joke, but seriously, Bob Durst reportedly on a ventilator with COVID days after he was convicted of murder. The 78-year-old New York real estate heir was sentenced to life in prison last week for the murder of his friend, Susan Berman, back in 2000, as she started asking questions about the disappearance of his first wife. If you're not familiar with the Robert Durst story, I highly recommend the HBO documentary called The Jinx. This is truly one of the more insane kind of true crime stories of our life.
China's economic growth is slowing down. The country's GDP rose just 4.9% last quarter compared to 7.9% in the prior quarter. China's huge industrial sector is not doing well as Beijing is taking a firmer hand in steering the economy. This is a huge story to watch, Carlo.
Yeah, absolutely. Is it starting to hit the U.S. markets, the futures yet? I haven't seen. In sports, the LA Dodgers are in a 2-0 hole against the Atlanta Braves in the NLCS. The Braves walked off both of those games. Pretty incredible there. The Dodgers 2 away from getting eliminated. In the ALCS, meanwhile, the Red Sox and the Astros, they are both tied up at 1 game apiece.
To answer your question, the futures are pointing a bit lower, but nothing, not plunging because of the China data. The Chicago Sky beat the Phoenix Mercury to win the franchise's first WNBA championship. 2 Chicago natives, Candace Parker and Allie Quigley, scored a combined 42 points in a comeback win to clinch the title.
Very cool. That was actually a really good series, that WNBA Finals. And just in the box office here, a pretty shocking weekend at the box office. Halloween Kills brought in more than $50 million. That was the biggest open of the pandemic for a horror or R-rated film. The Halloween installment was even available to stream on Peacock, and it's still massively overperformed in theaters. That's a really good sign for not just Hollywood in the box office, but just the movie theater industry as a whole.
What do we even attribute that to? I mean, it is really, really surprising that this film did so well.
Yeah, I don't get horror movies. I never have. The idea of being scared when I don't have to be, I've never understood it. But that people really like slasher movies, they really like horror movies, and there's something I think about the seeing a horror movie in the theater and that sort of like experience of being scared with a bunch of other people that I think really works, right?
The collective.
Yes, which I absolutely, I hate that. I hate this is another love-hating we could do. But anytime there's like a jump scene in a movie, that's like my least favorite thing. I don't understand how people can enjoy that.
So I am a huge Housewives fan. So if anybody here watches Beverly Hills Housewives, we could all laugh because we could say, oh, it's because Kyle Richards, who's one of the housewives, she's actually in this. And she's been talking about it on the show a lot.
Oh, all right. The Housewives bump.
Yes, you never know. Okay, this is a perfect segue, though, because for Love, Hate, 8 last week, it was Carlo and Jill go to the movies, movie theme.
Let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby to get ourselves a treat.
Okay, one thing we love this week or last week, I guess, just spending the extra few bucks for the upgraded cinematic experience, whatever that means, whether it means you go to the theater with the fully reclining seats, or you spend for IMAX, as I did when I saw James Bond the other day, or just being able to have a beer brought to you in your seat like they do at the Alamo Drafthouse. Becky and I, our first date was to one of those mattress theaters. You know the ones I'm talking about, where like they have not just like the reclining seats, but the ones that go like fully horizontal to like a bed. And I'm convinced to this day that's what got her to like me. She was like, "All right, this guy's willing to spend the extra few bucks for the recliners."
But why would you want it to go fully flat? Like, wouldn't that hurt your neck if you actually were trying to watch the movie?
Oh no, it's perfect because it's like it's on like a little bit of a slope, so you got a little blanket. It's great. Although sometimes you just fall asleep because it's like that good, right?
I was gonna say that seems like the perfect nap situation.
It is.
Yeah. One thing that we hate: people who show up late to movies. The previews have started, the house lights are dimmed, that empty seat next to you is free for your jacket or your purse until you hear it. Hi, is anyone sitting there? And then you go through that dilemma, which is like, do I say that this seat's already taken? Yeah. Do I lie because my coat is very happy over there?
Right.
But usually I'll admit that the seat is open.
Yeah, you feel guilty if you don't, I think, but it is the worst, right? You're like, I made it, and it always happens, right? It always happens after the movie has already started too. Truly one of the worst. Okay, and finally, one thing that we ate. My movie snack diet, I will tell you all now. It is as follows. Medium popcorn, no butter. Sour Patch Kids, so you can cut the saltiness with a little bit of acidity. And then a large Diet Coke to wash it all down. You feel like a truly disgusting slob for like the rest of the day when you eat like this. But I think it's all worth it. And I'm just curious, so what is your movie candy ranking? I know you so well, but I don't actually know what you eat at the movies.
I'm all about movie theater popcorn. In fact,
I knew that
I still do not understand why theaters don't sell it to go, particularly in the pandemic, because it's nothing that can be replicated at home, how hard as you try. So I feel like on a Saturday night, especially at the height of the pandemic, my husband and I would have went and just picked up some popcorn to come home and then put a movie on, and it would have felt like more of an event. I'm all about the movie theater popcorn.
Especially because the profit margins on popcorn, I think, are some of the best of anything. It costs like 2 cents to make that stuff, and they charge you what, $7?
That and like a coffee. Coffee is not what I eat at the movies, but coffee has a really high profit margin.
Yes, absolutely.
All right, so we wanted to just get in a couple of our listeners and some of their feedback as they wrote in. So Katie says she hates it when she arrives at the movies too early and ends up eating all of her snacks during the previews, and then spending the entire movie wishing that she had snacks. 15 minutes into the movie, all she could think is, I want more gummy bears. I get it.
You really have to. Yeah, you have to really plan out your attack when it comes to eating of the candy. You can't do it all at once, because then, like Katie said, you're really got a problem there. And Jan, I liked this one. Jan says that she loves just the shared experience in a movie theater when, like, during a pivotal scene, everybody starts either booing for the villain or cheering and clapping for the hero. She called this moviegoer camaraderie, and said there's nothing like it. And I really respect that. And it's actually, it made me think of this because I was watching Titanic this weekend because I don't know, I'm weird, and it was on Netflix.
Because you're weirdly obsessed with the Titanic.
I love that movie, and I love everything about it.
And you love the story.
I do, everything, yes. But it made me think, because there's the scene in Titanic where old Rose is talking about what happens to Billy Zane, to Cal, and she's like, I heard that he put a pistol in his mouth, during the crash of 29. And everybody, I just remember in the theater, everyone was like, yeah! And it's like kind of weird, right? You're like cheering for this guy's suicide, but it just shows you that, like, really good characters, right? You really feel like you're in it with them.
All right, well, that is what you need to know for Monday, October 18th.
All right, guys, thanks for sticking with us, and we'll see you back here tomorrow.